Saint Francis Xavier was born on the 7th of April 1506 in the castle of Xavier near Sangüesa in a district called Navarre, now in northern Spain. He was a member of a noble family and his childhood was one of privilege. In 1525, Francis went to study at the College of Saint Barbe, University of Paris, the theological center of Europe. On the 15th of August 1534, Saint Francis Xavier joined Saint Ignatius Loyola and 5 others to form the Society of Jesus. He was later ordained as a priest on June the 24th, 1537. Francis Xavier was the first Jesuit missionary to Asia. On the 7th of April 1541, which was his 35th birthday, Saint Francis Xavier left Lisbon for India along with 2 other Jesuits on board the ship Santiago. Around that time, Saint Francis was also appointed papal nuncio in the East. He later arrived in India on the 6th of May 1542. By the end of 1544, Saint Francis Xavier had travelled around India and the many surrounding islands, ministering to the poor and the sick. Later on, Saint Francis Xavier set out for the Far East. His voyage in 1545 marked the beginning of his missionary journey to Southeast Asia and other parts of Asia. Saint Francis Xavier first arrived in Melaka on the 25th of September 1545 from Goa, India. Crowds gathered on the shore along the fortress wall to greet and catch a glimpse of the Padre Santo, whose fame as a preacher and miracle worker of India had reached the port of Melaka. Between 1545 and 1552, Saint Francis visited Melaka 5 times, staying for a total period of about 16 months. Melaka was used as his launching site to the Far East. Saint Francis preached and gave sacraments to the Portuguese sailors and prisoners. He established a hospital for the poor and attended to the spiritual needs of the patients. During his stay here in Melaka, Saint Francis declined to stay in the houses of the officials of the fortress. He chose instead to board with a friend in a modest house. Later, he moved in to stay with the sick in the hospital of the poor. It was from this gate that Saint Francis would depart and went on his missions to the Moluccas and Ambon Islands, Japan and China. This is the site where a cross was erected on a rock by the Portuguese, as it was a spot that would never get submerged even at high tide. While he was staying in Melaka, Saint Francis was reported to often come to this rock to sit and to pray. It was this spot which Francis Xavier dusted his sandals in frustration over the governor's attempts to prevent him from proceeding on his China mission. Built in 1521 by Portuguese nobleman Duarte Coelho, the original church of St. Paul's Hill was called Nossa Senhora de Anunciada, dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary. Almost 30 years later, in 1548, it was deeded to the Society of Jesus, and the deed's title was received by Saint Francis Xavier himself. With the help of 2 other Jesuits, Saint Francis established the College of St. Paul in 1548. Saint Francis would have climbed the hill many times to pray at this hermitage and was reported to have even slept here before going to Japan. Saint Francis died at Sanxian Island on 3rd of December 1552. His body was temporarily buried on the island. The boat carrying the coffin arrived late at night in Melaka on the 22nd of March 1553. The following day, the body of Saint Francis Xavier was carried in solemn triumph by the clergy, nobles and people of Melaka to the hermitage of Our Lady of the Hill for the requiem service and burial. The body remained in Melaka until the 11th of December 1553 before it was transferred to Goa on the 15th of March 1554, where it has remained ever since. To commemorate the 400th anniversary of his journey in Melaka, a statue of Saint Francis Xavier was built in 1953. Saint Francis Xavier left flourishing churches wherever he went, which has served as the foundation of the Catholic faith in this part of the world in Asia.